Welcome to 7 Investing Now, a show that teaches you how to take a long-term view on investing by better understanding what's happening in the market now.
Good afternoon, 7 investors, and welcome to the Monday edition of 7 Investing Now. My name, of course, is Daniel Brooks Klein, and if I look flustered, it's because I am flustered. I usually don't do anything in the half hour before the show. I spend time reading my notes, going over last-minute changes. Today, I was supposed to pick my son up at the dentist. It's about a 6-7 minute ride, but apparently I didn't know where I was going. There was some sort of major police action, and then there was a road closed. So I literally just turned around and didn't pick my son up at the dentist. So my wife will be out doing that now, and I will be doing this show here with all of you, and of course, with Steve Symington. Steve, welcome to the program. How are you doing this morning?
Well, it's a happy Monday. It's like 80 degrees here, which is tropical for us, and golden. I'm good.
Are your kids out of school yet, or are they still in school?
They're out of school. So yeah, they're I don't know, they might just be waking up right now with how late they've been staying up. We were watching a movie last night, so that was a good time.
We have the opposite issue. My son has to get up for school at 6 a.m. So he is perpetually like an 8:40. He's 17. He's about an 8:45 at night, going to sleep. But he has 4 more days of school. And basically for the last 3 weeks, it's been like just watching Pixar movies. He's probably seen Moana like 40 times. I am not a big fan of. I feel like we should have just ended the school year on time, even though we started late. Like, it's been a tough year. Anyway, we're going to move on. We are going to talk today. And we, of course, would love your questions and comments. We're going to talk about the possibility that big tech is going to get broken up. Now, that has been a theoretical possibility for a long time, but let's just say things got a little bit more real. There are multiple bills in the House of Representatives that aim to do this, that aim to put some restrictions. We'll go into some of the things they could do in a second. I'll let Steve take that part from the show notes. But why do I think this is more serious than usual? Because there are reasons on both sides of the aisle, and we don't talk politics here, but we're just going to talk the overlying issue. There are reasons on both sides of the aisle where they want to regulate big tech. There is a right-wing theory that they're persecuted or not properly featured on some big technology platforms. There is a left-wing idea that these are monopolies. Well, there's some happy middle ground in regulating these companies that make it much more likely impossible. So we're going to get into talking about what this means for investors. But Steve, if you want to share just a few examples of what this, again, proposed legislation, this hasn't happened yet, but what this proposed legislation might do.
There's several bills kind of on the table right now, but 5 bills, and among them, for example, we could force Google to stop promoting YouTube in its search results, which would be, of course, Google acquired YouTube for something like $1.3 billion, decade and a half ago. So they're one company, for anyone who didn't know. Apple could be required to relax restrictions on iOS app developers. Facebook could be banned from acquiring nascent companies for the purpose of stifling future rivals. Really, when you talk about the most aggressive of these bills, we could be talking about tech giants using their control over multiple businesses. It would prevent them and potentially break them up. And prevent acquisitions. Lots of different things that could happen from these 5 bills. But whether they come to fruition is another story. We'll probably talk about that in a minute.
We're going to get into the investing angles, and we would certainly love to hear what you have to think about this. But this is a mixed bag. So let's go back to that Google example. Mm-hmm. Let's say I search. I'm trying to think of an accessible band. Let's say I search Coldplay videos. You know what I want to show up? YouTube results. So if I search how to fix a broken dishwasher, chances are the best answer for that's going to be on YouTube. It's probably not going to be on Vimeo or some other video platform. So I actually think there's a challenge here because obviously, if somebody searches what investing service should I buy? Boy, I would love for it to come up with 7 Investing's About Us page or whatever it is. But the reality is Google's actually trying to serve you the best result possible. Does that result tilt to them a lot of the time? Absolutely, it does. But Google's also done some really smart things. Like, for example, it used to be if there was something trending on Twitter and I wrote a news article about that tweet, my news article would be the first result. Now they show you the tweet because you probably want the tweet and the underlying conversation there. So I think this is a very, very mixed bag. Steve, I'm going to throw a bunch of questions at you about this. But before I do, in general, I don't think I favor this. Like I tend to believe that the market will correct this. And I understand that all of these companies are doing things that are bad. On the other hand, I worry about the unintended consequences of, say, the damage to small business if you weaken Facebook as a platform, or making search just not that useful, which I don't really have a lot of complaints about Google search. They generally get me the answer I'm looking for. And if they happen to make money, I'm not so sure I care. And the people impacted by this, well, they're competitors. Like, I think that's all right. But Steve, your overview thoughts here before we get to the nitty gritty of it.
I think one thing that's important to note is there's a big difference between looking tough in a legislative hearing and sounding like you're taking a hard line, and actually getting 60 votes for one of these bills on the Senate floor. There's a big gap to close before that happens. So I'm not entirely convinced these are going to cross in their current forms. And we also have, we could be looking at bipartisan support for these bills, but on one side, you have a party concerned about the ability of these companies, these big tech monopolies or duopolies in some cases, to stifle speech. And then on the other hand, you have people concerned about just the fact that they are arguably monopolies. But I think one of the bigger things that we also need to keep in mind is that there seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding about how a lot of these businesses work in Congress. Like, we saw that in the hearings, and it was like you have the CEO of Alphabet like explaining to his 97-year-old grandpa how the interweb works. Like, this is killer.
This is a very big problem. And look, I think the industry could have headed this off by having its own regulation. I mean, there's obviously some fishy stuff going on. And it would be much better to have an OSHA-style industry-led regulation that passes some meaningful reform. Look, I just downloaded the new iOS on my iPhone. And when I logged into every app, it asked me privacy questions. And I actually granted the social media sites permission to track my data. You know why? As annoying as it can be, if you bought a couch last month and Twitter's serving you couch ads, a lot of the times it's actually very useful. You're actually getting results based on what you were looking for. And I find it, certainly with small business discovery or restaurants, if I'm at our Davenport, Florida house and I search best Chinese, I want Facebook to be giving me targeted advertising content. That becomes almost content. So I thought long and hard about it. And I'm sure there are some apps I'm going to say no. Like I'm not sure that, say, like the gaming app I use. I play solitaire on Skills. I'm not sure they need to have my advertising information. But a lot of things I'm actually okay with it. But let's get into the nitty gritty for investors. And 7 investors, you are being awfully quiet. Let's see some questions and comments. So let me ask the big question for consumers, and then we'll get up into shareholders. Is this type of regulation, and I'll call it uninformed regulation, this isn't going to be good for consumers, right? Like, it seems to me that this will have unintended consequences.
That might be a leading question, but I happen to agree. It's not good for consumers. And I think that's one of those things that they will argue heavily is you will be harming consumers in the process. And all of these big tech companies have publicly said, we are all for regulation, but it needs to be the right type of regulation. And of course, that's going to be met with skepticism. Like you say, what's the right type of regulation? The type of regulation that allows you to continue dominating? Sure, in a lot of cases. But it's been great for consumers. Who doesn't complain about all of the revelations and positive technological changes these companies have brought. And a lot of them, the majority of their revenue is driven by small business. When you talk about Google Ads and Facebook's commerce pages and stuff, small business is thriving as a result using these platforms. So that's something that we can't ignore.
Yeah, and there are consumer-friendly things. So a lot of people have objections to the fact that Microsoft has bought Bethesda Game Studios, along with owning Minecraft and owning other things. Well, as a consumer, I pay for an Xbox on a subscription model, and with that, I get Game Pass, which gives me access to all sorts of games I used to spend $60 for. So does Microsoft lock me in as a customer? Absolutely. Would I have spent more had they not offered that deal? Yeah, absolutely. I am a huge believer in the mix of hardware and software as a service. Steve, that I bought my robot vacuum that way. I needed a new Roomba, and they offered a really good deal over at iRobot. You shared that with the team, and I went, wait, for $24 a month, or I don't remember the exact number, I get a new robot every 3 years, and they send me replacement parts. And wait a minute, it's a way better one than I have. It's self-emptying, which is awesome, by the way. So again, I am wary here, but let's go to question 2. Sure. Would a breakup of any of these companies actually be bad for shareholders? Because I kind of don't think it would be. Like, if Facebook had to spin off Instagram, as long as they weren't forbidden from having, some sort of partnership agreements, which certainly say like a PayPal, eBay did for years after they broke up, though they don't anymore. I actually think you might be unlocking value in some cases, but you know a lot more about this than I do. So go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I would say not necessarily. There's potential that as one business, as a single consolidated business, that these tech giants are more powerful and valuable and able to extend their reach. And but there is also an argument that we are looking at businesses where the sum of the parts is actually greater than the current valuation of the businesses, right? So when you look at Alphabet breaking out, their moonshots businesses, which are largely pre-revenue, from their cloud computing business to their any gaming efforts and hardware efforts and search and YouTube and all these different businesses. There's an argument that if you decided to break them up into all their disparate pieces, that the sum of those parts could be greater, and current shareholders would not be shortchanged in the process, right? You'd be like, well, now you own shares of these 5 businesses instead of just a single share of this one business. So no, I don't think it would hurt shareholders. You'd have a lot of annoyed people worried that it would, but I'm not convinced that it would.
And it depends what the breakups are. If you make Facebook sell Messenger, that's a problem. If you make them sell Instagram, those are standalone businesses that probably benefit from the advertising structure. But there's not I recognize you can use one to populate the other, but there's not a ton of interplay between them. Whereas if I'm in Facebook, I can see my Messenger messages. And look, I know these are not really the prime concerns of most people, but I think as an investor in many of these companies, there are things you want them to sell off. I'm not so sure I want Alphabet, if I was a shareholder, sinking billions of dollars into automated driving and other Waymo, sort of pie in the sky ideas. I'd really prefer that to be side projects funded by the owners. Like we're seeing with like SpaceX and Tesla. That's not a Tesla company. That is an Elon Musk company. It is important to think of it that way. Let's go with another one. Is there any actual problem being solved by this legislation? Does it help or hurt anyone that these companies? I mean, it hurts their competitors, but we've seen through the launch of all these big tech companies, other players emerge in those spaces. Now, it's also important to note that clearly the meaning of the word monopoly is not the way we define it. It doesn't mean has no competition.
Yeah.
But again, is anything being helped by this?
I'm not. Yes and no. I mean, I think the worry is that these businesses are too powerful and they want to stifle the power and reach is if it doesn't come at the expense of these up and comers. But I would say yes, they're solving it, but it's being politicized more than I would like in the process. The problems that they want to solve.
We've got a great comment from our very own Max Chatsko. Steve, why don't you read that one for us?
Yeah, Max says most of the Rockefeller fortune was made after, emphasis, Standard Oil was forced to split up as the family became shareholders in many businesses instead of one. So that speaks to the argument that would a breakup of these companies hurt shareholders and this, some of the parts and that's part of the reason that we've seen a lot of businesses divest portions of their own companies or spin off things because they believe that they can focus better on their specific niche as a standalone business. And a lot of times that fosters success. So great point, Max.
So power equals monopoly in the government's mind here. The old version of a monopoly was you owned something and you thereby didn't let anyone else have the similar product. So I'd go back to say the ISPs had a lot of power over, say, a Netflix by being able to say, hey, we're going to choke you off. And we did have some FCC involvement there and deals get made. None of these are typical monopolies. You can compete with any one of them. You just look, you and I, Steve, cannot launch a Facebook-sized company. But could we launch an online community for people with disabilities who like golf? Like, okay, is that unbelievably specific? Yes, but you could build off of that branch and build something. And just because you're not the dominant player, I'll point out, I grew up in a family that made ladders and scaffolding. My family still makes scaffolding. And our competitor was Werner Ladder, which is a multi-billion-dollar gigantic company that's nationwide. And how did we compete? Well, you can't compete by making a cheaper ladder. You can compete by being better at customer service and heavily serving the niches they don't go after. So they'd be out there selling the skyscraper, and I was selling the guy building a CVS or building a small apartment building. And you can do it different. And we're seeing that in all of these areas. There are competitors for all of these companies on a major level and on a small level. We're going to finish this one up soon. We appreciate so many of you watching out there, but of course you are being very, very quiet. We have to think there would be more questions and comments on this one. So Steve, I want to know, cable companies, ISPs, they are a pet peeve of mine. But why did the government not protect consumers from internet service provider monopolies? In fact, local governments generally signed exclusive contracts that forbid competition. I don't really understand why one type of monopoly is good and the other is bad. And to me, it actually feels like it's all politics.
Right. And those were the most frustrating for people because they really felt like they had, and still, in many cases, feel like
it's about 40% of the country still only has one ISP or cable company.
Yeah, and I guess there are companies on my scorecard actually that are trying to take advantage of some of those opportunities to offer more choice to regional internet providers. So that's something that's an opportunity, I think, to change, but it is frustrating. And that's one of those sort of narrow monopolies where, maybe they're not as concerned because it's not, I guess with some exceptions, your Comcasts of the world that serve a significant chunk of the country. Right. But local cable providers are they can be maddening when you talk about their lack of customer service, because in a lot of cases, either they're overwhelmed or they just don't feel like they have to pour as many resources into that aspect of their businesses because consumers have no reasonable choice, unless they want to go with some subpar little side, satellite internet gig or something. But
and in a lot of cases, that's not even an option. And let's get back to the word monopoly here. I don't have to use Facebook. I actually have the opportunity, if I wanted to not even use social media, to call my friends, to go to my high school reunion, to do all sorts of things. I could print out pictures. In fact, we do. My mother-in-law doesn't have a computer, so we print out photos and send them to her. My son writes her letters. There obviously are options to not use it, but with the exception of my mother-in-law, almost every American needs internet the way you need electricity or water. Yet in many places, it's still a legal monopoly, or your alternatives aren't good. Now, did this force innovation? Yes. 30 years later, you have your SpaceX's sending up satellites, and you have your T-Mobile building out 5G and making that a viable internet option in rural areas. Yep. But literally, those monopolies go back to the early 80s when cable was first laid. And I understand that was a monopoly in exchange for the expense of laying cable. But was that still an excuse literally 30-something, maybe 40-something years later? Steve, if you had to guess, and we'll close out with this, do you think there will be significant regulation over big tech in the next, let's call it 18 months?
If I had to guess, I'd say no. I wouldn't say. I would say that the government fails to reach a consensus on what that regulation will be in the next 18 months. It could be proven wrong, but if I had to guess, I'd say no, probably not. No.
I'm actually going to say yes. I think the piece of this that will pass is there will be something limiting purchases. There's going to be significantly heavier scrutiny on the big end, where if you're buying, if you're over X market cap and you're buying something that's over Y market cap, it gets an added layer. I think there's also going to be a little bit of what you talked about in the beginning on Facebook, where like, you know what, if somebody comes up with that new, put it in your ear and you can have a social network, play out on your glasses, and it's not Facebook, but it's a 3-person company that'll sell for $30 million. I actually think there's going to be more scrutiny for that too. That actually could hurt Apple, which you don't hear a ton about Apple in this discussion, but Apple is actually pretty famous for buying people who make some sort of app because they don't even want the app. They just want some piece of functionality and to own that team. And I'd argue that that's largely been good for consumers. You're seeing a lot of leaps and bounds. The story came out today that Apple is likely going to be able to monitor your blood sugar in the next iPhone. Now, I don't know if that will be enough for true diabetics to be able to use it, but it's certainly a positive. It's certain, so I think a lot of innovation has come from, well, my little company can do this thing. Wait, we're part of Apple now and it's in everybody's phone. I think that's really, really important. We're going to pivot and do what we're watching in a second. And we're going to talk about space. There's not a lot of notes on here. It basically just says space, but Steve is going to lead us in that direction. Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about something important that's happening here at 7 Investing. Steve, today is now June 14th. I'm not great at math, but that's roughly the middle of June. June has 30 days, unlike those months that have 45 or 50. No, they all have 30 or 31, except February, which is 28 or 29. So we're at about the middle. And that gives you about 3 weeks left to lock in 7 Investing at its current pricing. That's $17 a month or $170 a year. If you subscribe before the end of the day on July 7th, you get that pricing as long as you remain a member. So 2,432, you're a head in a jar. Our successors are doing this show. The Steve Simonton robot's on. You're still paying that. If you don't lock in, as of July 8th, our pricing goes to $49 a month or $399 per year. Now, look, it's a value at that price, at the new price. We do all sorts of things we didn't do when we started the original. First of all, there's 7 experts instead of just the 3 and 4 that there were in the early days. And it is an incredibly diverse team. We do members only events. This Friday coming up, we've got our new members call at 10 a.m. The existing members call from 11 to 12:30. That's where members can ask us questions about anything they want. All sorts of questions about the picks, questions about what is going on. And those are lively phone calls. So we won't belabor it. But if you want to become a member, and why wouldn't you want to become a member? It is 7investing.com/subscribe. Sam Bailey, if you want to share the address, that would be great. 7investing.com/subscribe. 3 weeks left. Get in now. Why would you pay more? If you're watching the free show, you are going to love the paid content. With that, Steve, There is a lot going on in space, and it is a little bit confusing because Richard Branson, or Sir Richard Branson, as we're supposed to call him, I guess we don't have to as Americans, but as he goes by, because he is knighted, which seems incredibly archaic, but he is. He has a second space company with a similar name to his first space company, right?
Right.
and it looks like they're going to go public in a SPAC. You want to explain what's going on here?
Yeah, so there's several things going on with the space economy right now. So first and foremost, just a few days ago, Sir Richard Branson is apparently in late stage discussions to take Virgin Orbit public via SPAC. And this is likely going to be a $2.5 to $3 billion deal is what they're searching for. So similar to the size of Virgin Galactic. And make no mistake, these are two separate companies, right? So Virgin Orbit actually spun off from Virgin Galactic in 2017. And that was essentially in order to allow both companies to hone their focus on their respective niches and yes, to pave the way for Virgin Galactic to go public in the first place. That happened in late 2019, but now we're seeing some progress with Virgin Orbit, and I believe it's going to go public. I forget the ticker already. It's like New Vector Acquisition Corp or something like that.
It is Vector Acquisition. It will trade under the ticker RKLB.
That's Rocket Lab. So Vector Acquisition, Vector Acquisition is the Rocket Lab. So actually, this is going to provide some, on that note, some competition for Rocket Lab, which is going public under its own SPAC deal sometime in the second quarter. So, anytime in the next several weeks, we should see Rocket Lab go public as well. But Virgin Orbit, as opposed to Virgin Galactic, which actually takes, its space tourism is in long haul travel disruption and a couple different markets like that Virgin Galactic is looking at bringing people to space. Virgin Orbit is all about small satellite launches. So 500 pounds to 1,100 pounds. They actually take a 747, attach basically a big rocket to the bottom, looks like a missile, drops off similarly to the way the Virgin Galactic space plane drops off of its mothership and launches it from air. So you don't need a platform, a rocket from the ground to do this. And it'll allow small payloads to be launched into orbit. And I believe they have another test coming up later this month or early next month. And they're going to live stream that test as well. So there's going to be Virgin Orbit's going to be all over everybody's radar, pun intended, in the next couple of months here, because it's got tests that it'll be live streaming and it'll be going public and it'll be confused with Virgin Galactic over and over again. But they are two separate companies.
And it's very important when considering investing in this type of SPAC to really understand the business. This is a long game. Virgin Orbit can do their tests. They can get a satellite or two up. This is not going to be a meaningful business for years. We've seen it with Virgin Galactic. Like, they hit some relatively minor milestone, like announcing a test, and the stock will move in dramatic form. You're not going to see what these companies are actually worth for maybe 5 or 10 years, maybe even longer than that for it to fully play out. Long haul travel may be a great business for Virgin Galactic, but that is transformative to the way the world operates now. And it's not going to happen overnight. And figuring out what the market is that a $25,000 ticket? Is it an $8,000 ticket? That's really, really different. So these are fun to talk about. Yeah. I have to admit, I own a very small amount of Virgin Galactic. Largely because I have so many friends that bet on it. I don't want to be left out 5 years from now if it scores. But be really careful here. And then, Steve, we've got what I call the race to kill a billionaire, where you have Blue Origin founder Jeff Bezos, who is trying to get to space before Richard Branson. I actually think this is kind of a terrible idea, that we should not be sending our best and brightest. And I understand the logic with Virgin Galactic of Branson basically saying, hey, it's safe, and that gets other people, but they have a huge waiting list. I'd rather random rich guy blows up than Richard Branson, who is an innovator and one of the more important humans. But explain what's going on between Bezos and Branson.
Right. So the other thing that we saw is over the weekend, Blue Origin successfully auctioned off its first ever human spaceflight ticket. The person who won this auction, they'll reveal in the next couple of weeks, and they'll be flying with Jeff Bezos and his brother Mark on July 20th for. They auctioned that ticket off for $28 million. Now, this is crazy because the bidding started. They've had this bid up to, available to the public for anyone who wanted to go through verification process and actually place a bid. The bid going into the live auction portion this weekend was $4.8 million. And it was crazy to watch because they live streamed the auction as well. You can go back and watch. It's really weird to watch people just casually, on the phone with their bidders. And he's like, hey, Jeff, what's your bidder say? 28, 26, 27, 27. 28 and but it went all the way up to $28 million for someone to take a space flight with Jeff Bezos. And what was really interesting though was that the interest was substantial. They had 7,600 registered bidders from 159 countries, and the proceeds are going to charity, right? For this first flight with Bezos factor. So it's not really a direct comparison to the pricing power or perhaps demand for the actual commercial space flights once they start kind of ramping that. Both Virgin Galactic and for Blue Origin, right? They're going to both start ramping space flights of their own. But it's still encouraging nonetheless that someone's willing to pay $28 million. For perspective, Virgin Galactic already has 600 people who've paid an average of about $250,000 to reserve their spots on their first flights. But this is also interesting because, those 7,600 registered bidders for the Blue Origin flight was kind of in line with some figures that Virgin Galactic had released before. So Virgin Galactic, they have the 600 future astronauts who've already put down a $250,000 deposit, but they also have 1,000 members of what they call their One Small Step program who have basically put down smaller deposits to be next in line. And then they've said they had 8,000 online reservations expressing interest following their flight in 2018 within a year. And they're going to reopen once they announce Branson's flight and actually do that successfully, Virgin Galactic, they're going to reopen ticket sales to the public, and we're going to get a good picture of what the actual demand for these flights are. And I think people honestly are going to be surprised in a good way if you're a shareholder. And in interest of full disclosure, I have a fairly substantial position in Virgin Galactic. And I think, when we're talking about businesses now with market caps of $6 billion, I do think we're looking at multi-bagger potential as the long term potential of these businesses begins to become more clear. So it's going to be an interesting next couple of months.
We're going to be keeping an eye on space, and remember, not affiliated with Orbit Gum. Virgin Orbit, not affiliated with the gum. That being said, Steve, we are going to hit the home stretch here. We appreciate you watching our very, very quiet audience today. But that said, we enjoy that so many of you are following us along for the ride here. Let's hit the home stretch with, are we at an inflection point for automation driven by the current labor shortage? So what does this mean? So you look at, say, your rich fast food chain, your McDonald's, which has routinely gone to its franchisees and said, hey, you have to spend $500,000 to update. We'll finance it. We'll give you some portion of it, whatever it is. Right now, if I own a McDonald's and I can't find enough people to work there, which is a legitimate problem in parts of the country, even with higher wages being paid in most cases, is that the point that I say, geez, I wonder what it costs to automate making a Big Mac? I don't think we're quite there yet, but it feels to me like we're going to have to start really asking these questions. Am I reading it wrong? You're sort of in the AI and robot space more than I am.
Right. I think that requires very specialized mechanics and specialized robotic solutions. And the technology exists, whether it is viable on a commercial scale for a company like McDonald's, to be able to have a robotic solution to make hamburgers. Sure, there's robotic chefs out there. Are they going to be in, 7,000 McDonald's locations in the next couple of years? Probably not. But I fast forward a decade and maybe the answer changes. But I do think there are markets that are already kind of being disrupted in the name of automation. And that could be something that's accelerated by the current labor shortage. And we were talking about this on our Slack channel earlier this morning. There are people quitting their jobs in droves right now. And some people sort of rage quitting amid the labor shortage. And so it's a really interesting thing to watch these dynamics that not a lot of people expected to play out, right? Because we have 7.6 million jobs or something lost during the pandemic that they wanted to get back, but now people are sort of retiring early or quitting, and the numbers, the math is kind of changing on what we need to be to get back to sort of pre-pandemic levels of employment if people are literally just quitting or retiring.
Well, there are some outlying factors here, and part of that is that childcare has not come back to the level.
Sure.
And we're heading into the summer, and summer camps are not necessarily operating the same way they normally would, or they're not obvious as viable as they were. So we're hitting that. There's also, if $15 is the minimum wage at a Taco Bell or a Chipotle, well, that's forcing wages up everywhere. And I have a teenager, 17-year-old, who's hoping to enter the job market this summer. You know what he's not worth? $15 an hour. He doesn't have any skills or practice yet. So, I think we're going to hit that problem. But I will tell you that right now, I 100% guarantee that your McDonald's and your Domino's of the world, and certainly your Walmarts, are heavily researching automation. That if you're in a field like, okay, is Starbucks ever going to fully automate, or any coffee chain going to fully automate? Probably not, because there's an artistry into what they're doing. But if you're ordering a medium pizza from Domino's, you actually want the sameness. You want it to be the exact same way every time. So, if I buy from Walmart and I want my order packed, I don't care if a person did it or a robot did it. So Is it going to be that quickly? No, I don't think it's going to happen that quickly. But I do think it is going to happen. And we're going to see it. Look, we've seen tests in this. All of this technology exists. It just becomes, what is the delta for actually bringing it online? Stock Investor has a comment. Steve, why don't you share that one?
Telling me I could be eating robot-made Big Macs soon? Yes and no.
I'd say the Big Mac is perfect for robot-made, because McDonald's is using kiosk-based ordering. They have a robust app, and you could go in and heavily customize. That's been one of the benefits at any of the coffee chains, where you could go to Dunkin' and say, like, I want a half calf, I want one pump of cherry and one of vanilla. And could you throw a donut on the top? Like, you can really get to very specific. I think that's going to be a benefit. And I've talked about this a lot when it comes to delivery. There was actually a Saturday Night Live joke about it this year, about having fake people in your hotel room to justify how big your room service order is. I actually think that when you order for delivery or pickup via app, the size of your order goes up, and it has for McDonald's. It's like something like 15 or 18% higher. And I think because there's less shame in getting a shake or adding an apple pie or a Grimace cookie. I don't even know if they still sell Grimace cookies, but that type of thing, it definitely seems like there is more of that. We're going to hit our finisher in a second here. But our own Max Chatsko, who Max never ceases to surprise me. I worked the grill at Wendy's in high school. I wished a robot would have taken my job. Yeah, those seem like difficult jobs. Steve, did you ever work in the fast food space?
I never did, but Max actually brings up a great point there. Robots taking our jobs. That's one sort of recurring fear that I've seen from a lot of people, is that, robots are going to take our jobs. Automation is going to take our jobs. Yes and no, right? I think the jobs market changes, and jobs will evolve. And those jobs that can be automated will be automated, but that doesn't mean they'll come at the expense of jobs for humans. We will simply find more effective, efficient jobs for people to do as a result. And that's something that I think we really need to keep in mind is we're not going to have a bunch of unemployed people because of robots. We're going to have different jobs for those people.
Like robot polisher.
But I mean, the market for blacksmiths obviously isn't what it was in the 1800s, because these are technologies that were sort of automated largely, and we can do a lot of that with robots. But the jobs changed, and we're going to have more cerebral jobs, and not necessarily all thinkers, but there are trades and everything that people can go into that won't be disrupted for a long time. But robots aren't out to steal everybody's job. But some jobs will go away as a result and be replaced with others.
I will say there's a bit of a robot pitfall. So I've talked about, I live very, very close to a Target, about 0.4 miles from a Target. And I went to Target yesterday with my son, and we were buying 3 or 4 things we didn't particularly need, and the line was significant. Now, they have a very large automated checkout area, and the automated checkout is so bulky that you need a person half the time anyway. You're buying alcohol, something didn't scan right. So there's almost as many people serving that area, which is gummed up, and then there's only 2 or 3 registers open. And the problem is they did at some point in the 35 minutes I spent in line, which is preposterous, they did call people over to open new registers. But instead of saying, hey, you're third in line, come over here, just the people at the back of the line got to go ahead and get out in front of me. And it's a significant problem. And look, some places we're seeing it that there's actual labor shortage. In the Orlando area, I have had the problem of walking into restaurants that aren't that crowded, and they say it's a 20-minute, 30-minute wait. And that's simply because they have not gotten waiters and waitresses either to come back, or they have new ones, but they're not trained yet. So it's going to be a bit of a period, because we went from essentially minimal tourism to, oh my God, it's crowded in like 2 weeks in that area, in that, call it the greater Disney area. So there are going to be temptations too. And I think this is what we're seeing at Target, to have less personnel to offset the extra expense of the pandemic. And that to me is a very slippery slope. I heard more than one person in line say, boy, if I wanted to wait in a line like this, I just would have gone to Walmart. And if you have Target customers thinking that Walmart might be a better option, that's not great, because that was absolutely a customer service driven brand. Thank you for watching the show. We are going to move into the end here and hit our finisher. Sam Bailey, if you want to share the graphic. Do you think 25% or more of all retail sales will be conducted online by 2025? 88.6% of you said yes. Steve, I want your thoughts here. Then I'm going to show another graphic.
So I think part of the reason that so many people voted yes on this is the fact that a lot of people probably assumed that it was higher than that already. And that's one of the things that I think people are like, yeah, everybody, it's got to be more than half, right? No, it's nowhere close to that. But yeah, go ahead and run with that. I think that's part of the reason.
So Sam, let's show this other graphic here, because this is a pet peeve of mine. In the second quarter of 2020, which would be the height of the pandemic, e-commerce was 15.7% of total sales. Now, why is that? It's because a lot of things we purchase, we still purchase in person. We're at 13.6% now. Do I think that number will climb? Yes, but I did a survey of my own sort of purchasing habits. And I order from online retailers 2 or 3 times a day, very, very regularly. But my wife goes to the grocery store and she spends a couple $100s a week. Well, I don't spend a couple $100s a week in my online purchases, and I still usually go to, say, a physical liquor store, or I go shopping to buy pants. Now, I did just buy some shorts online, and thankfully they fit, so that worked out. But for the most part, you think you're buying more online than you actually are. Now, I personally am above that 13.6 because I bought my car online, and it's an online sale. If you agree to the deal online, you don't actually have to conclude the transaction. So if you made a reservation to buy something but could pay in the store, that would still be considered an online sale. So this is actually tipped in favor of online sales in an omni-channel world. And I have a hard time believing if during the pandemic, when it was hard to leave our house, when we all needed things that you couldn't necessarily get at the stores that were open, if we didn't hit 20% then, why over the next 3.5 to 4 years would we get to 25%? I don't think that's likely. And I hear all the arguments, oh, it's so easy to be on your couch. But Steve, you have kids. Do you go to the mall because you need something? Or do you go to the mall because like there's pretzels there and like it's a mall and maybe there's you have young kids, there's a carousel maybe or other things to do.
I don't go to the mall at all, but no, sometimes it's nice to just get out.
Do you have a mall? Like I didn't even think about this.
We do have a mall. It's actually pretty nice, and they're significantly expanding it. So got the AMC Dine-In, which I can't wait to go back to once there's some decent movies, and we have a mall. So
yeah, I am bullish on online retail, but I do think there are limits to it. I think there's things we want to buy in person. And I admit I once every couple of weeks will order groceries online because I'm just simply backed up and don't have a chance to get to the store.
Sure.
But I still prefer to go to the grocery store and look at the fish I'm buying and, you know, and see what they might have on the shelves. Like, I don't know. I think this is a lot of noise about nothing. With that said, thank you for watching today's show. We'll be back on Wednesday. Friday, please remember that we do this show at 12:30. And we will likely have most of the team. We probably won't have Honorbond, but we will have most of the team because it follows our members only event. So if you are not a member, what are you waiting for? That is 7investing.com/subscribe. If you'd like to get in touch with us, that is info@7investing.com. And of course, if you want to follow us on social media, which I suggest you do, we're a lot of fun. You can get access through the @7investing account to all of our personal accounts and watch us interact, watch us talk to members, watch us talk to our friends. It is an awful lot of fun. I had a really good weekend on social media with people thanking me for some stock advice that is something I've actually made an official recommendation on, but they didn't know it from that. They knew it from me talking about it years ago in another forum. The other thing that gets a little scary, though, is when someone thanks you for something that you didn't recommend. And someone thanked me online for recommending Crocs. I did not recommend Crocs in any fashion. I did a show where we talked about Crocs. That is very, very different. And I did private message that person, though they did make money on the deal. So that being said, be very, very careful with how you take any advice on Twitter. With that, thank you, Sam Bailey. Thank you, Steve Symington. I am Dan Klein. We'll see you Wednesday.